Episode 1828. Morana was now in a difficult situation, because she knew very well how terrifying those daggers were. The explosion of that kind of red energy crystal in a small area is as powerful as the death of love. The most powerful move of the demon god machine is to burn it to achieve overload. There are thousands of such weapons. They were flying in the air like deadly poisonous snakes, attacking her from all directions. Morana's face was terrifyingly cold. She opened her hands, and a strong cold air enveloped her surroundings, forming a huge field around her body to block the dagger's invasion. Seeing the scene, Platos just slowly raised his right hand from the far side, and his fingers danced flexibly like a conductor's baton. Click. Click. The dagger moved closer to her body. Explode. As soon as Platos finished speaking, the dagger closest to Morana suddenly flickered. The self-destruction device was activated, and the red volume inlaid on the surface was about the thickness of a finger. It suddenly changed from dark red to bright red, and finally reached a level close to white. Its power was quickly activated, and then through the detonation device on the side of the dagger, the power instantly exploded in the direction pointed by the dagger. The direction of Morana. Morana felt the power of that force, but now all the areas around her were blocked. Her only choice was to use all her strength to resist the close attack. Boom! A violent explosion appeared on the spot, and the sound of the explosion was fleeting. The commanders far away in Samalan City could only use satellites to see a huge red mass explode from a high-altitude perspective. There was no sound because the scene was completely in a vacuum. The power level is comparable to the explosion of a small or medium-sized death of love. Zitsy, zitsy. The screen flickered quickly and then completely turned into a snowflake. In the entire command center, the images on multiple monitors disappeared one by one, and nothing could be seen on the battlefield. Those staff members quickly took off their earphones to avoid having their eardrums penetrated by the strong electric sound. A female officer turned her head and reported to the trio in Padaga. Due to strong signal interference, all the monitoring equipment on site can no longer continue to work. Pataka asked hurriedly, "Where is the satellite? Can the satellite work normally?" It is difficult for spy satellites to observe the scene. But Songcheong-1 is in normal working condition and can be launched as long as the correct coordinates are given. After all, Songcheong No. 1 is a device that exists as a trump card weapon and will not be interfered with so easily. But now, unable to observe everything happening on the scene, Songcheong-1 has become blind. Except for Morana, who can use it, it is difficult for others to achieve precise strikes on the ground from a long distance. How could this happen? Will the strangers in the temple be okay? A male officer whispered with an earthy face. The most powerful army, and it still had the advantage of soil combat, actually fought in such a miserable manner. Judging from the situation before the screen disappeared, the temples were even in an extremely dangerous state. Demon God B, the second among the 10 demon gods, was so difficult to deal with, which was beyond their imagination. The judgment was wrong. Our judgment was wrong. Pataka muttered, his eyes no longer as calm as before, his pupils vibrated violently, and he was obviously in a state of chaos. Their judgment on the strength of the 10 demon gods can only rely on the intelligence obtained on the battlefield. In their opinion, the 10 demon gods are all fighting mechanical life forms of mechanical civilization. Even though there are differences in strength, they can be roughly judged. Using the intelligence fed back from the battles of Zhang-Yi, King Arthur, and other teams, they believed that they were fully prepared for this battle. If the opponent is at the level of Demon God C and Demon God Ding, Morana's strength is definitely enough to win. The winner will definitely be easier than King Arthur and Zhang-Yi. But he didn't expect Demon God B's strength to be so terrifying. B and C are not on the same level at all. Padaka forgot. The 10 demon gods are good and ranked well. They are just code names given to them by humans to facilitate their identification. But sometimes, people can easily be deceived by themselves. The 10 demon gods have never been the top combat power of mechanical civilization. There were many machines like the lower demon gods in the past of mechanical civilization. Demon God A. Loradek, and Demon God B. Plato's. They are special beings. It can even be said that they are completely different from other demonic bodies. On the battlefield, Plato's quietly admired the violent explosion from a long distance away. "It shouldn't be that easy to die," he said calmly. Suddenly, a crisp sound came from him. Crack. A crack appeared on his face, and several small pieces of metal fell from the air, revealing half of his snow-white face. It's somewhat similar to a human's face, but it's incredibly handsome and coquettish. He touched the gap on his face, feeling quite interested. "It's indeed interesting," he muttered. At the center of the explosion, after the mass wave gradually dissipated, a terrifying ice and snow storm surged out from the red light, as if an endless white wave emerged from the deep sea and rose into the sky. This ice and snow storm reached an altitude of 1,000 meters and then headed straight for Plato's. In the ice and snow, Mirana's face appeared. In the ice and snowstorm, the tough ice turned into sharp swords and shot towards Plato's. Plato's had a hint of amusement in his eyes, and then stretched out his right hand forward. He just pushed forward with his right hand, and then grasped the air. The air seemed to be severely compressed by something, and an invisible shock wave slammed forward. Boom! The ice and snowstorm that was comparable to a tsunami was directly restrained in its forward momentum, and then it was suddenly defeated from the middle. In front of Mirana's body, huge ice walls erected. Each ice wall was like an iceberg. But under Plato's blow, the ice walls were barely enough to block them, and they shattered one after another. Even though he was surrounded by thousands of daggers and attacked by that powerful and terrifying force, Mirana's face did not show any surprise. But at this moment, her face finally showed an expression of surprise. Plato's did not resort to super-era weapons and easily defeated her counterattack with just his supernatural power. Within an inch, everything is within your control. Plato's power is to control everything within his field of vision. It's not as simple as simply controlling objects. Compressing air creates a shock wave, which can instantly attack everything around you. There is no sign of this kind of attack, and there is no attack trajectory at all. The power is very simple. For an existence of his level, combined with the powerful technological power of mechanical civilization, there is no need for too complicated power, as long as the power itself is strong enough. Although Thor and Moon God noticed something was wrong with the battle situation here, they had no time to come to support at the moment. Because at this time, they realized that this weird guy next to Demon God B was actually as powerful as the lower Demon God. Karag is the younger brother of Plato's. Although he is not as talented as his brother, he uses the most advanced technology of mechanical civilization and a core shaped by powerful energy crystals to make even the most useless person capable. Have top-notch combat power. The attacks from the God of Thunder and the God of the Moon were extremely difficult to even break through his defenses. Karag looked at them like they were two interesting toys. His attack movements were extremely skillful. The combat crystal implanted in his core made his mechanical body flexible enough to deal with various attacks like a powerful warrior. His fists and kicks were sharp, and his body was flexible. He happily put on fighting postures one after another. It was like a game to him. In the battle between Mirana and Plato's, he fell into a disadvantage. Absolute Zero is an extremely powerful force, but she is not a strengthened alien, so her defense is hard to come by. The armor made of ice can barely neutralize an attack, but the strength of the physical body is there. After just a few rounds of fighting, her internal organs began to feel abnormal, and blood overflowed from the corners of her mouth. The combat uniform injected her with stimulants and therapeutic drugs, which allowed her to temporarily relieve her pain without affecting the battle due to her injuries. But how to win this battle next is a huge problem for her. Therefore, when she was near Plato's, although she was able to block any movement of Plato's body, she was also unable to bear the attack of Plato's telekinesis. Plato slowly floated in the air. Behind him were thousands of sharp daggers, which were randomly combined into various forms according to his thoughts. The powerful power of science and technology, coupled with top-notch mental power, make him almost have no weaknesses at all. Morana took a deep breath, and after sensing through the intelligence system, he was still able to communicate with Songcheong One in the sky. This made her feel a little relieved. But the next moment, the dagger behind Plato's danced rapidly in the air, turning into a pair of huge wings behind him. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The feathers of the black wings fell off and shot toward her. Morana waved her hand vigorously, and an endless frost storm surged around her. The terrible hurricane mixed with a large amount of thick ice spread towards the surroundings. The huge tornado reached the sky, covering an increasingly larger area, as if it could destroy a city. The storm caused the dark clouds in the sky to twist together, and there were bursts of thunder. And this posture is just to defend against those daggers that carry the power of a medium-sized god of death. Plato saw the magnificent frost storm in front of him and just raised his two arms. He stretched his hands straight, closed them together, and then slowly opened them to both sides like opening a door. With his telekinesis, he invaded the huge storm wall. The roaring hurricane, the terrifying storm, seemed to destroy the entire ice and snow plain, and the tornado was actually torn open by a hard force from the middle. Morana's figure appeared in front of Plato's again, and Morana seemed to see the coldness in his eyes. No anger, no murderous intention. Indifference is like pulling out a nail from the board. The command center of Samalan City was already in a state of chaos. The signal was completely lost on the frontline battlefield. After all, the war between Morana and Plato's would affect any existence within 100 miles. Two guys who can be called the god of death of love, who dares to spy at close range. However, the scene before the picture disappeared had already made Petikason feel that the situation was not good. Their confidence was completely lost. Bodaka paced back and forth in a hurry, his hands behind his back, his brows almost twisted into knots. No, we can't go on like this. The battle situation is extremely critical now, and we can't bear the price of defeat this time. It's not like they haven't seen other countries fail to fight here before, but the consequences are just not as clear as before. Rome and the Kingdom of Kermit, all different teams from the two countries were killed. This also indicates that in the near future, these two countries will inevitably be annexed by other powerful forces around them. Without a top-notch alien to dominate the country, this era of mutation is extremely fragile. Similarly, if the three giants, who symbolize the highest combat power of the pantheon, are defeated or even killed, Fremons will be completely removed from the international first-line camp from now on. This world is very cruel, and the weak are not qualified to speak out. What's the use of being anxious now? We have to find a way quickly. Eli held his pipe in his mouth with his head on his back. At this time, the pipe had been smoked out, and he didn't even realize it. He was still sucking hard with. Ask for help. Seek support from other countries' different teams. Right now this is the only way to solve the problem. Beyond that, everything else is in vain. The god of death of love cannot be used either. As long as that kind of weapon is launched, even the country on this planet will be able to detect it, let alone mechanical civilization. Yes, we need to ask for help from other countries' different teams. Vladimir also said in approval. Several of them spoke very fast, not even willing to pause. Padagama said, now that troops from all countries are performing tasks, it is difficult for them to solve their own problems. Who can help us? Eli came over and grabbed Padaga by the shoulders. You know who to look for. Now that we have time to rush over, we will only be in chaos in Huashu countries. Hearing this name, Pataka's face became even more ugly. You asked to find that guy? He is a ruthless character who eats, but doesn't spit out bones. The three giants are all smart. In emergencies, they know who to go to for help. It's Bodaka, but he doesn't want to go to Zhang-Yi. Getting along between them is not a happy one. Once something happened to Giselberg, he had already humbled himself and asked Zhang-Yi, but in the end he was forced to use resources instead. This incident has always made him very angry. If Zhang-Yi is asked to take action this time, the price will be extremely high. It may even bring heavy losses to Fremons. Eli stared into his eyes. Then what else can we do? Are we going to watch our strongest alien troops die? No, doesn't mean. It's just that doesn't want to go find that guy. Pataka argued. He thought for a while and said, now that 3 alien troops have returned from completing their mission, we don't have to look for chaos. Vladimir's eyes lit up. The Knights of the Round Table of Britannia have returned. It is said that they independently captured an underwater civilization, and now the strength of the entire team is unfathomable. Judging from the information we currently have, they should be the strongest among the teams coming this time. To ask them to take action? Petaga also hurriedly said, yes, Chaos is not as strong as Morana. He is just better at defense and escape. Even if he is allowed to pass, it may not have any effect. I think it is best to contact King Arthur. Safe. As soon as he finished speaking, he immediately started to contact King Arthur. A few seconds later, King Arthur's voice came from the communication device. His voice was low, with a hint of exhaustion after the battle. Hey, Mr. Pataka, what's the matter? Pataka hurriedly told what happened. Your Excellency King Arthur, now we are in great need of your help. Demon God B's strength has exceeded our expectations. The temple team has encountered a lot of resistance. If you are willing to help, we will definitely be able to solve this crisis. After what happened, we are willing to share half of the resources for this battle with you. Time was urgent, and Bodaka did not hesitate like he did in the past and directly gave out the conditions of submit and lure. After hearing this, King Arthur had a look of regret in his eyes. I'm sorry, Pataka first. After the previous battle, I and my subordinates have not recovered yet. If we are forced to engage in a second, more complicated war in a short period of time, I would like to use our current situation as unacceptable. In that battle, he faced demon god C alone. If he chooses to join forces with Merlin too, it should be easier to win. But as the King of Knights, he always has a sense of chivalry. Perhaps he also wants to compare with Zhang Yi, so he insists on going one-on-one with Demon God B. The result is that at this time, he is very weak and his combat power is not as strong as the peak of his strength. In this state, facing Demon God B, whose strength is obviously much higher than other demon gods, is tantamount to courting death. What's more, from the analysis of Pataka's words, it is still unclear what happened to the battlefields of Morana and others. What if they rushed over all the way and all the temples were killed? Wouldn't they also have to serve as a plate of lunch for demon god E? King Arthur didn't think twice and directly rejected Pataka. Pataka's heart sank. He knew that he could not convince King Arthur. After all, no one could die for that benefit. But there was no time to delay at this time. He thought about it and immediately contacted the Bharata team, Emperor Shakti. Although the combat power of the Bharata team is weaker than that of the Knights of the Round Table, it still has 1 bishop-level alien and 2 chariot-level aliens. As long as they join, they will definitely be able to increase the winning ability of the temples. When Emperor Shaktin received Pataka's request, his entire state was very bad. The battle with the demon god Zheng left him injured. At this time, he still had many tubes inserted into his body and was undergoing treatment. And this time, returning to Fremons and letting Azura die in battle is an extremely heavy blow to the entire Bharat. Now we can only hope that they will bring something back from the battlefield to make up for their losses. Pataka's request left him speechless. But thinking about it carefully, he actually felt a feeling of pleasure in his heart. Although they won miserably, look at Fremons, he couldn't defeat the Mechanical Legion himself, and he had to ask him for help. Sure enough, Bharat is the strongest country in the world. Fremons is just a paper tiger. Even though he said this, Emperor Shakti still rejected Pataka. He briefly explained the situation of Bharata, and Pataka could not continue talking. A black tank-level alien died in battle, and Emperor Shirtion himself was injured. How can you still force the family to stay on the battlefield? Neither the Knights of the Round Table nor the 8 tribes are willing to go to support. Pataka's voice was trembling with panic and anger. But more than that, it's still fear. Unable to seek support from the outside world, it is very likely that the gods of the gods will die on that battlefield. Fremons will be completely reduced to a second-rate force in the future. Pataka, return to chaos. Return to chaos. Go to him and ask him to help. Alai grabbed Pataka by the collar and roared. He usually used Stankong to comb his hair neatly, but his hair was scattered due to excessive movements. At this time, he no longer cares about his own image. Pataka bit his tongue and said, "The Knights of the Round Table and the 8 tribes refused to help because they themselves had just ended a battle and were unable to go over to support. Do you think that the Huashu Kingdom's foreign troops will be enough? Not to mention that Chaos Guy is very cunning, but in their current state, I'm afraid they won't be able to maintain it, and we can go back to support them." Alai yelled, "Go and try. How will you know if you don't try? If Morana and the others are finished, we will all be finished. Do you understand?" He spat on Pataka's face. Pataka clenched his fists and finally shook his head weakly. "It's useless, Alai. We can only pray now." He didn't think Zhang Yi would have too much influence on the battle situation in the past, because he never thought Zhang Yi was as strong as King Arthur or Morana. In his eyes, Zhang Yi is just a businessman who cares about things, has no structure, and is not too tough. He would just huddle himself behind the door. When Alai and Pedaga were arguing, Vladimir, another member of the Big Three, walked up to the two and stretched out his hand to separate them. "Wait a minute. Take a look at this first."